I refuse to pay this outrageous bill. You need to get your manager here right now.
The first thing to break was not a glass. It was the room's silence. One moment, Meridian hummed with soft music and careful laughter. The next sound seemed to fold in on itself. Forks stopped in midair. A man in a navy suit closed his mouth on half a joke. Even the ice behind the bar slid into a glass without a splash anyone noticed at the corner table. Power sat, relaxed. Billionaire CEO Damon Halberg leaned back in a high leather chair, one arm stretched along the top like a claim. Above him, on a wall of smoked glass, the steel logo of his company Helixion Dynamics glowed faintly. Meridian was his kind of place. Dark wood, sharp lines, every table shaped like a private boardroom. The staff knew his favorite wine. The owner knew his schedule. The room moved around him the way planets circle a star. He did not lower his voice when he spoke. You know, Damon said, pointing with his knife toward the waitress beside him. Some people stay in jobs like this because they're not educated enough to do anything else. It's not their fault. It's just reality. The words crossed the white linen faster than any rumor. The waitress, Alana Rivers, stood with a metal water pitcher in one hand and a folded white napkin in the other. A moment earlier she had asked, gently and practiced, "Would you like me to explain the chef's specials for tonight?" That simple question now hung in the air, wiped out by his remark as if it had never existed. One of Damon's executives dropped his eyes to the tablecloth and studied the stitching as if it might open and swallow him. Another adjusted his tie twice, then stared at his plate. A third lined up his fork with his knife and said nothing. At nearby tables, people stared without staring, eyes flicking over, then away, pretending they had not heard what every ear had caught. Meridian sold itself as the place where big decisions dine. Tonight, it showed how quickly a room full of influence could decide to be small. Alana did not spill the water. Her shoulders stayed straight, her chin level. Only her fingers moved, pressing the edge of the napkin between thumb and forefinger. The cloth gave slightly, then folded into a sharp line. That crease was the only sign she allowed herself, a quiet claim of control inside a moment designed to shrink her. Damon did not see the crease. He did not look at her face. His attention swung back to his guests as if he had brushed away a crumb. "I mean, look around," he said. "Some minds are built to run systems. Some minds are built to follow instructions. That's just how the world is sorted." Thin laughter scraped out around the table. It sounded more like fear than humor. Wealth shone across the room. Watches, cufflinks, a gold bracelet that flashed each time its owner moved. But in the silence that followed Damon's words, another kind of poverty showed itself, one no bonus, donation, or speech about opportunity could hide. Alana heard everything: the remark, the excuse, the weak laughter, and the quiet agreement wrapped around them. The sting in her chest was not new. She had felt it years earlier, walking out of a college office with a withdrawal form in her hand. An advisor had smiled and called it guidance when he said, "With your background, you may want a more practical path than engineering." That same week, a hospital bill had erased her family's savings. She had left school and gone to work because survival did not wait for pride. Tonight the old pressure to shrink returned, urging her to accept that some doors were never meant for her. She chose not to step back. "I'll bring your mains shortly," she said. Her voice was calm and even, the sound of a line drawn rather than erased. She moved away from the table with measured steps. The pitcher stayed steady. The napkin, marked by its single sharp crease, lay warm against her palm. It was only cloth and thread, but it felt heavier now, like a small witness that refused to look away. Around her, Meridian hurried to reset. The music crept a little louder. A server at another table told a joke with too much energy. The smooth show of wealth snapped back into place, as if a public insult were nothing more than a brief service error to be covered and forgotten. In the kitchen, heat and clatter closed around Alana. Tickets hung from clips above the line. Pans hissed. A co-worker glanced at her, reading something in her face. "You good?" he asked quietly. "I'm working," she replied. Feelings would have to wait until after closing, after rent, after everything else at the narrow service station by the back door. She set the napkin on the cool metal counter and smoothed it flat. Meridian's blue logo sat in one corner like a quiet brand. A black pen lay beside the register. On impulse, she picked it up and drew a straight line along the crease, turning the fold into a marked path. She did not know why it mattered, only that the line needed to exist. "Table 12 needs clearing," someone called. Alana folded the napkin again, hiding the ink inside the cloth, and slipped it into her apron pocket. It rested against her hip, light as paper and heavy as a promise she had not yet named. Out in the dining room, Damon lifted his glass and spoke about vision, about moving pieces on a board until everything landed where he wanted it. His guests nodded, eager to stay close to his certainty. None of them looked at the woman gliding between tables, carrying plates and a small, marked napkin. And none of them, not even Alana herself, could sense that the thin line she had just drawn in secret was the first hairline crack in a future that would one day close around Damon Halberg's name. The first warning did not roar. It clicked a faint, almost polite sound, built to impress the world, doubt to impress the world. From the outside, Heliction Dynamics looked flawless. Its headquarters rose from the city like a blade of mirrored glass, catching sunlight on every surface. News outlets called it the future of logistics. Investors praised its automated networks. Reporters used words like breakthrough and unstoppable inside the tower. Damon Halberg walked through the lobby as if the whole building had been designed to echo his steps. Employees straightened when he passed. Assistants trailed behind him with tablets held like shields. A security guard opened the elevator before Damon even slowed down. He liked that. It told him the world understood his rank. On the top floor, the executive boardroom looked strangely similar to Meridian, the restaurant from the night before. Long table, dark wood, soft lighting, chairs arranged like a command center. Damon believed calm design created calm thinking, but today.com thinned the moment he sat down. On the large screen, the numbers did not match yesterday's confidence. Before we start, one analyst said, tapping her tablet, I want to flag something unusual. Damon waved a hand, make it quick. She clicked a button. Supply chain graphs rose on the screen like tangled lines. Some dipped too fast. Others spiked without reason. We're seeing small routing delays across 3 hubs, she said. Just a few minutes each. But they're happening more often. Damon leaned back. A few minutes won't sink us. Another analyst cleared his throat. There's also a rise in cost overruns. Not huge, but irregular. They don't follow any pattern. Patterns are overrated, Damon said. What matters is output. And our output is strong. The analysts exchanged a quiet glance. It wasn't disagreement, they were too careful for that. It was concern they didn't know how to voice without risking their jobs. A third analyst, younger and newly promoted, broke the rule of silence. Sir, our automated distribution network is showing small failures. They look harmless, but if they connect, they won't. Damon cut in. Our system is the best in the industry. He tapped the table. The sound was sharp. Final. No one challenged him, but the data on the screen told a different story. The lines trembled like threads pulled too tight. Small delays, mysterious cost holes, disappearing inventory that no camera could explain, all separate on paper, but quietly leaning toward each other like storm clouds drifting toward the same sky. Heliction's shine covered a strain. Damon refused to see. His pride ran ahead of his caution. The company's public image, glittering, precise, admired, had become a mirror he stared into without noticing the cracks spreading behind him. He turned the meeting back to safer topics, quarterly forecasts, new partnerships, media strategy. His voice filled the room with practiced certainty. Heliction sets the pace, he said. We don't follow the market. We define it. The board nodded. Cameras in the hallway captured him walking out with confident shoulders and an easy smile. Editors would later use the footage in a short video about corporate success. Down below, in a much quieter part of the city, Heliction's main routing warehouse hummed with its usual mechanical rhythm. Robotic arms shifted crates. Conveyor belts glided with boxes marked for supermarkets, hospitals, and small businesses. Everything looked orderly. But one machine, a sorting unit near the back, hesitated. Its scanner flickered. A metal guide arm paused at the wrong angle, nudging a crate half an inch off course. The belt pushed forward anyway, forcing the crate into a narrow gap where it did not belong. There was another click. Soft, easy to miss. A small red light blinked once on the control panel. The system did not shut down. It adjusted, rerouting the strain to another unit. That unit compensated by moving faster than it should. A sensor recorded the overload but filed it under not critical. No human noticed. The crate continued on the wrong path. A single mistake, sliding through a giant network built on the promise that everything was always correct. In the glass tower above the city, Damon stepped onto the balcony outside his office and looked down at the skyline with calm satisfaction. He believed he was running a perfect empire. He had no idea the empire had already begun to shift under his feet. Far away in the warehouse, the red light blinked again, once, twice, then stayed on. The memory returned like a map, unfolding in her mind, simple lines at first, then pathways she had walked all her life. Alana Rivers stood behind the restaurant after her shift, the cool night pressing gently against her skin. In her hand, the folded napkin felt like a small square of calm in a world that refused to slow down. She held it the way some people hold keys or keepsakes, quietly, with meaning. The night opened the door to her past. As a child, Alana used to sit beside her father at their kitchen table while he traced freight routes across giant paper maps. His hands were steady, his voice patient. Under the warm light of a hanging bulb, he explained how packages traveled from one city to another, how trains, trucks, and ships danced in patterns most people never noticed. Every route tells a story, he would say, drawing smooth lines from east to west. If you learn the story, you can fix anything that goes wrong. Alana had loved those moments. She loved the clean angles, the quiet logic, the satisfaction of turning confusion into direction. While other kids played video games, she sketched pretend networks on scrap paper, connecting imaginary cities with bright red pencil marks. Her father teased that she could read a map before she could read a book when she grew older. Her dream sharpened. Industrial engineering. It felt like the world's biggest puzzle, one she was meant to solve. She earned a scholarship and walked into her first college class with a backpack full of notebooks and the steady confidence her father had given her. Then life changed in a single week. Her father collapsed at work. The medical bills came fast, heavy as falling bricks. Insurance covered some, but not enough. Her mother worked 2 jobs already. Her younger brother needed school supplies and bus passes. There was no one else. Alana withdrew from her program after 1 semester. The advisor called it a practical choice. She called it necessary. Practical meant survival. She found work at Meridian because it offered steady hours and tips that covered what paychecks could not. At night, when the restaurant dimmed and the last table emptied, she cleaned menus and refilled salt shakers. Between shifts, she studied patterns without realizing it: how customers ordered, how servers moved, how the kitchen solved problems without talking. Her mind never stopped running its quiet calculations. The napkin in her hand tonight carried the same energy. Earlier, when Damon Halberg's remark hit her like a cold wind, she pressed the napkin into a crease to hold herself steady. Later, she had drawn a single line on it, straight, sharp, intentional. It was the kind of line her father used to draw, the kind that turned noise into direction. To others, it was just a napkin. To her, it was a reminder of the mapmaker she once planned to become. Inside Meridian's back alley, she unfolded the napkin now. The crease ran through its center like a path dividing one place from another. The ink line nearly matched it, thin but stubborn. She traced it with her finger. Damon's voice from the night before tried to settle over her again. Not educated enough. Some people stay where they are. Reality. But the line on the napkin pushed back silently, like a boundary she refused to cross. She remembered her father's steady tone. What they call you is not who you are. She let out a slow breath. The world did not need to see her potential for it to exist. It only needed one moment, one break, one open path for that potential to matter. And even if that path had not appeared yet, she would be ready when it did. A car passed on the street, its headlights brushing the alley walls. The city hummed with distant traffic. The warm smell of bread drifted from a bakery closing down the block. Alana folded the napkin along the same crease, smoother this time, as if sealing a promise to herself. The line disappeared inside the cloth, but she knew it was there. She felt it like a compass point. She slipped the napkin into her jacket pocket. Then, with shoulders straight and steps steady, she walked into the night, choosing not to carry Damon's remark, only her own quiet direction. The first crack in Haliction's empire did not roar. It blinked once on a small screen before sunrise. At 5:03 a.m., the national dashboard still pulsed with life. Green icons dotted the digital map like calm lights in a sleeping city. Lines of motion traced the paths of millions of shipments. Operators leaned back in their chairs, sipping lukewarm coffee. Nothing looked out of place. At 5:05, one green icon turned yellow. A technician zoomed in. Probably nothing, he said, tapping in a reset. The icon stayed yellow. At 5:08, 3 more hubs shifted color. Yellow. Heads rose. Coffee was set down. Are you seeing this too? A woman asked from the next row. Her neighbor checked another map. Pigeon shipments waiting. No assigned routes. A warning blinking in the corner. Routes not resolving. Then the soft chime of the first alarm sounded. Another followed. Then another. Within a minute, the control center drowned in overlapping alerts. Red markers spread across the front wall. Error, delay, path lost, route. Haliction's automated network, once praised as unstoppable, was failing across multiple hubs at the same time in the Midwest. Conveyor belts slowed to a crawl. Robotic arms froze, their clamps holding crates with nowhere to go. In coastal hubs, trucks lined up outside locked loading bays. Inside refrigerated units, compressors hummed, waiting for routing commands that never came. Minutes turned into losses. Cold goods warmed. Timers ticked upward. By 5:30. Tens of millions of dollars worth of cargo stood still inside a system built to never sleep. Damon Halberg's phone rattled on his nightstand. He stared at the flood of alerts. Critical failure. Called immediately and felt irritation first, then something colder. He dressed fast, tie uneven, and drove through a calm city that didn't yet know one of its proudest companies was collapsing. Inside the control center, calm was gone. Screens glared red. Operators moved in quick, clipped motions. Phones stayed open. No one looked away from the storm gathering across the digital map. What am I looking at? Damon demanded as he stepped inside. The operations director met him with tired eyes. Network-wide routing failures, she said. Multiple hubs. The system is rejecting active routes. Override it, Damon said. Full reboot. We've done that twice, she replied. Each reboot makes the failures spread faster. He looked at her sharply. Spread? Before she could answer, an analyst pointed to a side screen showing value at risk. The number climbed steadily. If we can't restore flow soon, he said carefully, we're looking at about $200 million in losses. The number froze the air. That is not acceptable, Damon snapped. It's not a choice, the analyst said. It's projection. The lead systems engineer stepped forward and pulled up lines of code. To the room, it looked like a wall of symbols. To him, it was the heart of the failure. The problem started in the routing algorithm, he said. The last update changed how it reads the tolerance parameter. Damon's voice cut like a blade. Plain English, the system thinks normal traffic is a crisis, the engineer explained. When things get busy, it shuts down the route. Then it tries another path, sees the same thing, and shuts that down too. It's looping. Nothing resolves. On another screen, a refrigerated list scrolled downward. Timers beside each shipment climbed 1 second at a time. La 018, La 019, 020, those seconds carried price tags. What if we raise the tolerance? Damon asked. We'll push more volume, the engineer said. But some hubs aren't built for that pressure. They could overload. And lowering it, the network will freeze. So every option hurts us, Damon said. No one disagreed. On the central screen, red zones connected like spreading cracks in glass. Green routes took on extra pressure until they too turned yellow. Then red. What had been scattered issues now formed a growing band of failure across the country. Damon paced, issuing rapid commands. Freeze new intake in trouble regions. Contact every regional manager. Flag high-value shipments. Draft a statement about temporary delays. His voice filled the room. Sharp and urgent, but it could not touch the numbers in a Midwest refrigerated warehouse. A confused sensor shut down a cooling unit it believed was empty. It wasn't. Pallets of medicine rested inside, their clocks quietly running out. Back in the control center, more graphs appeared. Capacity dropping. Delays rising. Losses climbing. Lines crossed in jagged patterns, signals of a system buckling under its own rules. Damon stopped talking. He stared at the screen's error counts. Failure loops. Projected losses symbols, shifting in ways he could not understand. They formed a language he had never learned. One that refused to obey authority. The red glow washed across his face. Damon stared at numbers. He could not decode his empire slipping. The door to Meridian swung open with a tired sigh, as if even the building could feel the weight of the day. Damon Hellberg stepped inside with 2 exhausted executives trailing behind him. Their shoulders sagged, their eyes dulled from hours of staring at failing systems. The restaurant's dim lights softened nothing. If anything, they made the lines of stress etched into their faces even sharper. They moved to the same corner table where Damon's careless remark had once cut through the air like a blade. Tonight, he had no sharp edges left. Menus stayed closed. No one was hungry. The only thing they wanted was a quiet place to think. Somewhere away from flashing alerts and endless red screens. Alana Rivers noticed them the moment they sat down. She was sweeping crumbs from a nearby table, the soft brush of the cloth steady in her hands. The napkin she had folded the night before lay tucked safely in her apron pocket. She wasn't expecting anything unusual. Just another long night shift. But the sight of Damon, pale, tense, no longer overflowing with confidence, made her pause. She approached with calm professionalism. Good evening. Can I get anything started for you? Damon didn't even lift the menu. Just water, he said. His voice carried none of the arrogance from before. It sounded as if it had been scraped thin by hours of failure. Alana poured the water quietly, then stepped away, yet she didn't walk far as she refilled a nearby table's glasses. She heard Damon's voice drop into the low, a frantic tone of someone fighting a losing battle. This algorithm collapse is destroying us, one executive whispered. Every fix we try creates another failure. The tolerance readings don't make sense, the second said. The system thinks normal traffic is impossible. Damon rubbed his forehead. There has to be a missing piece. Something small but fundamental. We're overlooking it. Alana froze. Their words hit her in the same spot where childhood maps used to live, lines, paths, decisions made at crossroads. She saw patterns that most people ignored. The collapse they described wasn't just random failure. It sounded like a classic routing choke, the kind her father used to explain when tracing freight lines across their old table. She hesitated. This was not her world, not her job, not her place, but the problem tugged at her like a puzzle demanding to be solved at the service station. She set down her tray and pulled a fresh napkin from the stack. With cautious fingers, she unfolded it on the counter and picked up a pen. She started to draw, first a central route, then branching paths. She added a bypass system, something her father once called a relief lane, a simple structure that let pressure spill onto alternate routes before the whole system broke. Then she marked 3 pivot points shaped like small diamonds. Those would force the algorithm to reroute intelligently when traffic hit a limit. It was simple, old school, the kind of thing engineers learned before automation took over everything. When she finished, she stared at the napkin. A small map, a quiet solution, a problem she wasn't supposed to solve. Her heart thumped as she approached Damon's table again. She didn't speak right away. She waited for him to look up, and when he finally did, she placed the napkin on the table's edge. This might help, she said softly. I overheard what you're dealing with. I'm sorry if that's overstepping. One executive frowned instantly. "Miss, we're discussing proprietary systems. You shouldn't." Another executive shook his head dismissively. "You can't solve a logistics collapse with doodles on a napkin." Alana didn't argue. She simply stepped back with quiet dignity. "Of course, I just thought maybe it could be useful." She turned to leave, but Damon's hand shot out not to stop her, but to pull the napkin closer. His eyes narrowed, scanning the lines, the diamonds, the relief lanes, the pivot points, the simple logic, the pattern. His breath hitched. "We tried something like this," he murmured, "but not like this. We missed the secondary pivots and the pressure spill routes." The executives leaned in, suddenly very awake. "Where did she learn this?" one whispered. But Damon wasn't listening. His focus locked on the napkin, on the idea drawn in quick, confident strokes. His mind raced through the implications if this worked, if the system responded, if the routes corrected themselves. His pulse quickened. "Test this," he said, voice tense with urgency. Immediately, the executives scrambled for their phones. Alana stood a few steps away, not sure whether she should return to a shift or stand still. Damon didn't look up. He held the napkin as if it were the first lifeline he'd seen all day, and for the first time since the crisis began, something in him flickered thin but unmistakable. The proof began with a single rising line, thin, bright, and impossible to ignore. Heliction's simulation room glowed with the cold light of dozens of screens. Engineers hunched over keyboards. Analysts whispered updates in clipped tones. The air buzzed with the tension of a building that had spent 2 days drowning in failure. On the main display, Damon Hallberg stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. His hands kept flexing, as if trying to force control back into a world that had stopped listening to him. At the back of the room, almost out of view, stood Alana Rivers, quiet, steady, hands folded in front of her. She wore her server's black shirt and simple apron, looking painfully out of place among the badges and expensive suits. But her napkin sat on the front table like a strange document of truth. Every pivot, every line, every hand-drawn pressure bypass. The team had scanned it, coded it, and built a test version of the logics she had sketched in minutes. Now the simulation began. A graph appeared at first. The line dipped, mirroring Heliction's collapse. Red zones across the map blinked like warning lights. Damon inhaled sharply, then slowly, the recovery curve rose. One hub switched from red to yellow, another from yellow to green. Routes that had jammed for hours began to clear in compressed time. Pressure points released. Overloaded corridors reset. The system started breathing again. A murmur swept the room, disbelief mixed with awe. This shouldn't work," one engineer whispered. "But it is," another answered, voice cracking. Damon stared at the screen, his face a careful mask, but his eyes betrayed him, wide, disoriented, shaken. The idea that a waitress had solved the failure his team of experts couldn't even diagnose pressed against him like a weight he didn't know how to lift. He turned toward Alana. His voice came out low. "Where did you learn to do this?" She met his stare without flinching. "Routing patterns are something I studied for a long time. My father taught me the basics. Engineering school filled the rest before I had to leave." The words "had to leave" sat heavy in the air, carrying more truth than she explained. Damon blinked, remembering with painful clarity the derogatory remark he had thrown at her days earlier, words that revealed more about him than her. The image of her standing beside his table with a water pitcher struck him now, not with superiority but with shame. He swallowed, unable to form the apology the moment demanded. Alana, seeing nothing she hadn't expected, remained still. The simulation continued. "Look at the throughput," an analyst called out. "We're returning to baseline faster than projected." "And the tolerance levels?" Damon asked. Another engineer tapped a screen. "Stable. Her pivot logic avoids the overload without freezing the system. It's elegant." The word hung in the air. Elegant, simple, right? Everything Heliction's expensive algorithm was supposed to be but hadn't been. The room fell into a stunned silence. A senior engineer stepped closer to Damon. "Sir, we should test it in a controlled hub. If it holds, we can rebuild the entire network around this structure." Damon nodded. "Do it." A countdown flashed across the main screen. Live test hub 760 seconds. Alana exhaled quietly. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her fingers curled slightly as if bracing for impact. It wasn't fear, it was the knowledge that her work, drawn on a napkin out of instinct and memory, could now shape the future of a company she didn't belong to, or didn't used to belong to. The test began. Data surged through simulated routes. For a moment, everything hung suspended in uncertainty. Then the first corridor cleared. The second opened. Refrigerated routes stabilized. Overload indicators dropped. The lines on the main map brightened from warning red to steady green. Engineers erupted into cheers that sounded more like relief than celebration. Damon didn't cheer. He accepted long, slow, almost human, and then turned fully toward Alana. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire CEO. He wasn't the center of every room. He was simply a man facing someone he had underestimated, someone who had changed the trajectory of his company with a pen and a memory. "You saved us," he said quietly. Alana shook her head. "I gave you a model. You saved yourselves. But Damon heard the gap between their roles, the same gap he had widened with his earlier insult, the same gap she had crossed without hesitation when she offered him help. His voice softened. Alana, I need you at headquarters tomorrow. Engineers turned, startled. Alana blinked. Tomorrow, yes, Damon said. Steadier now. There's more work to do, and I want you involved. She hesitated, feeling the weight of the ask. A waitress with unfinished schooling standing in the center of Heliction's recovery, caught between her quiet world and the map of possibilities opening before her. Her future hung in the balance. Damon waited, holding the napkin gently in one hand, as if it were far more than a piece of cloth, and as the room watched, his pulse quickened. The moment Alana stepped into Heliction's top-floor conference room, the air tightened, quiet, cold, and sharp as a pane of glass about to crack. Rows of senior engineers sat at the long table, badges gleaming, laptops open like shields. These were people who built the company's backbone, who spoke in code and calculations, who rarely faced challengers from outside their world, especially not a waitress wearing borrowed business clothes and holding a folded napkin. But this napkin had already done what none of them could. Damon Halberg stood beside her, posture straight, face set. The crisis still haunted the building. Everyone could feel it in the humming lights, the rushed footsteps outside, the half-empty coffee cups abandoned in hallways. But progress had returned. Systems were recovering, shipments were moving. And now the people who ran the company needed to understand why. Alana placed the napkin gently on the center of the table. If setting down evidence in a trial, a senior engineer raised an eyebrow. This is the solution. Another leaned forward, more skeptical. We've already seen it in simulation, but we need to hear it from you. In your own words. Alana nodded. Her voice stayed calm. Each pivot point redirects flow before pressure builds too high. The relief lanes prevent the algorithm from shutting down when traffic spikes. It keeps the system from choking itself. The room went still. She explained the logic cleanly, step by step, how the bypasses caught overload before it spread, how the pivots corrected mistakes before they multiplied. The engineers watched her draw clean lines across the whiteboard, reconstructing the structure she had drawn first on a restaurant napkin. One by one, expressions shifted. Skepticism softened, confusion faded, respect, startled, undeniable, took its place. A veteran engineer finally spoke. This is elegant. The same word used in the simulation room. It's simple, but it fixes the flaw and stabilizes the entire network. Another nodded. It's the kind of solution we stopped teaching because we think we've moved past it, but this is exactly what the system needed. Alana didn't smile, but she held her ground with quiet confidence. Damon watched her, feeling a weight inside him shift. Just days ago he had dismissed her with a careless remark that revealed a blind spot he had never questioned. Now he saw her clearly, precise, thoughtful, professional, refusing to shrink in front of experts who had underestimated her before even hearing her speak. A board member at the far end of the table cleared his throat. Yes, it works, he said, but we need to consider the optics. A non-employee without formal standing designing a core piece of our infrastructure. If this gets out, investors might panic. It looks like lack of oversight. Another joined in. There's also the matter of hierarchy. We can't signal that our systems can be fixed from outside. It sets a strange precedent. A third leaned back, fingers steepled. We appreciate her help, but we have to be careful. We can't elevate someone who doesn't even work here. It undermines the chain of command. Every sentence felt like a doorway closing. Damon's jaw tightened. His eyes moved from the board to Alana, who stood completely still, listening to people debate whether her contribution was worth. Acknowledging it hit him harder than expected. This was the same kind of dismissal he had thrown at her in the restaurant. The same blindness, the same quiet stripping of dignity that had helped build that culture, one that rewarded confidence, but ignored truth unless it came wrapped in the right title. His voice broke the silence. No, he said. The room froze. Damon stepped forward, placing one hand on the table, not as a threat, but as a declaration. We are not burying her work, he continued, not because it looks unusual, not because it makes us uncomfortable, and not because it exposes our blind spots. A board member frowned. Damon, he didn't let him finish. She solved the collapse. Damon said, louder now, every word sharp with conviction. When the system failed, and when we failed to fix it, she stepped in and saw what we couldn't. She saved this company. The engineers said nothing, but several exchanged glances with something like approval. Damon turned fully toward Alana, his voice steady. I dismissed you once. I won't make that mistake again. The board shifted uneasily, caught between hierarchy and truth. Alana held his gaze, not defiant, not grateful, simply present, steady in a place she had earned through clarity and courage. Outside the conference room, a notification sounded from the operations floor. A system-wide announcement flashed onto the screens. Network stabilized. All hubs on linear. Ripple of relief swept through the glass tower. Shipment paths glowed green. Refrigerated routes aligned. The damage curve flattened. For the first time in days, Heliction's system moved in clean, confident motion because of her design, because of the napkin, because she had refused to stay silent when the world tried to shrink her. Engineers exhaled. Damon closed his eyes for a beat, letting the truth settle. Board members exchanged reluctant nods, the kind people make when reality overrules their discomfort. Was safe. Its empire restored, not by wealth. Not by pride. But by a woman who saw a map where others saw chaos. And as the confirmation alerts continued echoing across the building, one fact became impossible to ignore. Heliction had stabilized because of Alana Rivers. The morning light hit Heliction's glass tower like a verdict, clear, bright, impossible to ignore. Inside Damon Halberg's office, the shine felt different than before. Less like triumph, more like truth laid bare. Alana Rivers stood across from him, hands steady at her sides. She wore her usual calm, not the polished confidence of executives who practiced power in mirrors. Her presence alone shifted the room's atmosphere, quiet strength against the backdrop of steel and pride. Damon cleared his throat. Alana, I want to offer you something official. Something worthy of what you've done. She waited, not rushing him. He continued. A strategic analytics apprenticeship, paid full access to data teams. A pathway to engineering leadership if you want it. The words filled the room like slow-building sunlight. Damon had never offered anything like this to someone outside the company's inner circle. But Alana didn't leap at the chance. She considered it, her gaze steady, her voice firm when she finally spoke. I appreciate the offer, she said, but I want to be clear on a few things. Damon nodded, almost grateful for her directness. I won't be used as a story to make the company look better, she said. I won't be paraded as a symbol, and I want fair pay, real pay, not a discount because of where I'm coming from. The words landed with precision. She wasn't asking for favor. She was establishing ground. Damon met her eyes. You'll have full pay, full respect, and full authorship of your work. No spin, no saving face. Just the truth. Alana nodded once. Then I'll accept. A soft shift moved between them, dignity crossing the space that arrogance once filled. As Alana left his office, Damon sat back in his chair, feeling the weight of something large and overdue. He had built a company that prized innovation but ignored the people standing right in front of it. Now he had to rebuild something harder. Its culture. He clicked open a blank document titled Internal Reform Initiative. The first item he typed was simple. Address class bias in hiring and promotion. The second, require humility training for leadership. The third, listen. Actually listen. He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard, realizing how far his reflection had come. Not long ago, he had used a napkin to dismiss someone. Now a napkin had become the blueprint for his company's survival and his own moral repair. That afternoon, in her small apartment above a bakery, Alana placed a simple wooden frame on the kitchen counter. Inside it sat the original napkin. Not flattened, not polished, just as it was when she drew the first lines. Creases and all. She didn't frame it as a trophy. She framed it as a reminder. The world often valued facades of tall buildings, the big titles, the perfect speeches. Yet it was the quiet truths, the overlooked people, and the simple acts of clarity that held real power. The napkin was her anchor, proof that dignity lived underneath the noise, and truth could rise from the smallest corner of a crowded room. Her brother peeked over her shoulder. That's the famous napkin, he asked with a grin. She smiled. It's just a napkin. But they both knew it wasn't. At Helixium, changes began quietly. A junior technician received a chance to lead a test group instead of being ignored. A receptionist's suggestion about delivery timing got taken seriously for the first time. A new hiring panel reviewed resumes without names or backgrounds attached. The company's steel walls did not shine differently, but something inside them did. Damon walked through the halls without the usual buffer of assistance. When employees approached him with concerns, he didn't brush them aside. He listened, fully. His confidence hadn't disappeared, only softened into something more grounded. He kept one photo on his desk now, the scanned napkin design, small and powerful, framed beneath the words, never underestimate unseen brilliance. Late one evening, as the city lights flickered against the glass tower, Alana stood outside Helixion with her backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked up at the building, not in awe, but with steady resolve. She wasn't entering a new world. She was reclaiming the one she had been pushed from. The wind brushed her jacket. The night felt open, like a map waiting to be drawn. Dignity couldn't be bought. Truth didn't bow to titles. And justice often began as a quiet line on a simple napkin. Alana stepped forward. Above her, the tower's mirrored surface caught the last light of day and shattered it into bright shards, just as, long ago, silence had shattered in a crowded restaurant, marking the first crack that would lead her here.